Yes.
Cool. Perfect. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. I'm really, really excited to see so many of you here in the Dream Lab after almost 13 months of planning. Now, the ball got rolling for this conference, however, and it started quite a bit before that. In spring 2018, I was writing a term paper on the German poet Gottfried Benn and its cynicism on the poetry cycle Morgue. Professor Ostmeier suggested that I read Sloterdijk's Critique of Cynical Reason for it, but unsurprisingly, she ended up reading the book herself much more thoroughly than I had, which inspired her to teach a class on cynicism the following winter. It was during this class that I realized the numerous understandings and embodiments of cynicism. In November 2018 also, we had a graduate symposium, and I really didn't want that to be a one-time thing, so I volunteered to take over the planning for that graduate symposium. Now, Grad Symposium and Cynicism came together with my stubbornness to plan way too big, and now in February 2020, we're all here for the Interdisciplinary Graduate Conference on Cynicism and Irony, and I'm super happy about that. It's actually the first graduate conference organized by the Department of German and Scandinavian since February 2011, and I hope it won't be the last for yet another decade. Quote, "I know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it nevertheless." I'd opened the call for papers for the conference with this quote by Slovenian professor Slavoj Žižek because it encapsulates modern cynicism in a beautiful simplicity. I know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it nevertheless. Now, last week, Žižek's quote came to my mind, and not just in preparation for this conference. I was scrolling through Facebook, as I do way too often, and I came across a picture posted by The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, 3 panels of an interview at a Trump rally. I will show it to you. You can see it here. The woman says, "You can tell Trump hasn't done anything wrong. He'd be trying to hide things." Now, the sentence alone, of course, if it were a play, either comedy or tragedy, would be dramatic irony on its own. But then the reporter asks, "So if you were blocking witnesses, you'd think he was hiding something?" To which the woman answers, "Right." The reporter says, "But Trump is blocking witnesses." Her reaction, "I don't care." But I don't want to get too political here. We have a panel for that tomorrow morning. And over the course of roughly 10 hours, 5 panels, an exciting keynote speech, we will hear different takes on cynicism and irony. In Professor Ostmeier's class, we started our survey of cynicism with the charismatic figure of Diogenes, which is why I decided to have him pictured on this conference program. Or more specifically, a story of him, Alexander the Great. Alexander, having heard many great things about Diogenes, goes to him and offers his generosity, asking if there's anything that Diogenes would want. Now, Diogenes, laying in his tub, says, and I quote, "Yes," said Diogenes, "stand a little out of my sun." It is said that Alexander was so struck by this and admired so much the haughtiness and grandeur of the man, who had nothing but scorn for him, that he said to his followers, who were laughing and jesting about the philosopher as they went away, "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I wish I were Diogenes." And Diogenes replied, "If I wasn't Diogenes, I would be wishing to be Diogenes too." What a fascinating mindset. But back to the present. I know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it nevertheless. You know, Jeremiah, how would you describe cynicism, maybe in a sentence?
So my description of cynicism is it is a falsely enlightened consciousness.
I like that. Now, before I go more into cynicism, I also invited Professor Ostmeier to give a couple of words on this topic, as it seems to be her new specialty. So please, Professor Ostmeier, if you could come up for a few minutes.
Normally he calls me Dorothee.
That is
now
true.
It seems it's
That is
different.
So this is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. I have to say.
Hold this or put it on somewhere on you if that's
I have to
possible.
carry this down. Yeah, I have to say that teaching the class on cynicism was a result of my kind of frustrations in the current political context, because I feel like always overwhelmed by current news, every minute new, and I feel there are so many levels of cynicism that they are very difficult to analyze and to look through. So I thought I have to organize a class. I ended up reading Sloterdijk, and then in class and all of these discussions with our students, so many students came up with interesting projects which I had never heard about, especially in contemporary media, game studies, etc., that I learned as much from you guys than I could teach you, and that we continue now with a larger group of all of our guests to discuss this topic is very exciting. So why cynicism? Cynicism is a riddle nowadays because it is not enough to analyze it as mocking literary device. What I had learned before, when I was still studying in Germany, of course, we did cynicism as a literary device. Cynical remarks not only dominate our contemporary political discourses, but are also used to further systems of oppression. It is urgent to sharpen our understanding of the long-standing cultures of cynicism that we encounter every day, often passively. We are humanities, We are humanists facing ethical challenges every second. Cynicisms inform our daily routines, news updates, and social media stories with Lügenreden, Falschenreden, irreführenden Reden, Spottreden, lying, false, misleading, mocking speeches. And we need to be able to critically review our own reaction, may it be cynical, skeptic, jaded, or even lethargic. Apathy and lethargy that kills our social and political activism are perhaps the most dangerous results of the cynicisms that enwrap us every moment. When we listen to the news so much that we are in danger to lose the energy to resist. In the early 1980s, two cultural philosophers devoted their scholarship to cynicism. Peter Sloterdijk published his 1,000-page book, Critique of Cynical Reason, in Germany in 1983. And Michel Foucault reflected on cynicism in his Paris lectures in 1983 to 1984, The Courage of Truth. Then in 1996, Žižek's Irony versus Cynicism took up this critical analysis of our political culture and ideology. He refers to Sloterdijk at one point as one of the most accurate diagnosticians thank you, yes. Of our time. If you would ask me about the differences between cynicism and irony, I would refer to Žižek, Judith Butler, Sloterdijk, Neil Gaiman, and generalize only one aspect of their arguments. We are structured by ideological, religious, social, hegemonic, and gender norms. They are all fictional. As Judith Butler would argue, there is no independent I that can simply choose freely between these norms. You know, I think we are all still informed by this decision, I am I, and I can do what I want, and I have a free choice. No, nowadays I think Butler makes a very strong point that that is not as easy anymore as one thought in the 19th century. So they are deeply ingrained in us. However, we can detect some gaps between the norms that pre-structure us. Butler would say, what we might call agency or freedom or possibility is always a specific political prerogative that is produced by the gaps opened up in regulatory norms in the process of their self-repetition. So fantasy, or what Butler calls possibility, and its many subgenres, can insert their power, capitalize on these gaps, and their liberating potentials. Irony and cynicism are certainly the creative forces to do so. The major difference between them, according to Žižek, is their perspective towards hope. Irony is suspicious that there is any reality behind our ideologies and fictions. And I think that's a very strong statement. Is there any reality behind our fictions and ideologies? The cynicist, however, would insist on the hope that there is an ultimate reality behind the cobweb of our symbolic fictions. Sloterdijk, who differentiates naive, diffuse, and other cynicisms, for example, explores here the idea of the enlightened nobody or enlightened yes body. Now, this is a very complex topic I will not touch upon, But there are only a few sentences in the 1,000-page books which insist that there is a hope that we can explore an otherness which is more than our subjective I, as it is presented by Fichte, Hegel, and the Kantian discourse. Ideas of such alternate realities are not present in ironic discourses. And if you think of ironic discourses, we were thinking about the situational, dramatic, or verbal satirical ironies. We had planned, and we will not do it, a very tough dialogue to stage it here. And Joscha is very politically correct. He says, no, Dorothee, let's not do it. See, people might feel alienated. And I thought, okay, that's the typical situation which we are facing in our society, right?
Very cynical of me.
It's very cynical. It's very cynical, and I understand it too. Because when I'm teaching, I have to be politically correct. Because I have students in the audience who could sue me for saying something. Okay, and that is why that we don't stage our imagined fun dialogue where he would attack me and would say, "Ah, oh, Dorothee, playing clever, huh?" And that would be, of course, sarcastic irony. And I would then respond to him in a cynical way. But I better don't say that. Today and tomorrow, we all engage in the critical diagnosis of a broad variety of cynical and ironical discourses. I'm, as a matter of fact, fascinated by all the topics you will address, and I look forward to learning from you. I congratulate Joscha and all of our graduate students to bringing all of us together to undertake these crucial tasks of discussing the intellectual turmoil we experience in our postmodern and often post-human realities. Don't we all ask ourselves often how to survive in an environment of bureaucracy, politics, entertainment culture that is based on lies? How do you respond to a politician, for example, who mocks a victim of sexual abuse? Do we helplessly laugh about this laughter? Are we turning away into political lethargy? You don't. You are here. Congratulations. That you are here shows that you are not doing this. And I'm so proud, and I'm hopefully can participate as much as I want to, because now I have to teach, but I will be back again. A warm welcome from all of us in the Department of German and Scandinavian to this fun of critical exchange and debate, the only hope I think we have in facing the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dorothee. I'm just gonna scream while Dorothee keeps the microphone for now.
Oh.
Don't worry. I have a loud voice.
I would have left with it.
No. Okay, don't worry. All right, thank you again very much, Dorothee. Just a few more words from me on what I understand when I use the word cynicism. I know you've heard something from Jeremiah, you heard from Dorothee. I want to quote Colorado State University's Professor Emeritus William Klüppel, who wrote in his 1999 book, Cynicism in America, quote, "Cynicism is a durable cultural strain. It grows vigorously, even feeding on its proposed remedies. Cynics, by definition, have learned to live with moral contradiction." This roughly sums up what Sloterdijk means and what Jeremiah said with the false enlightened consciousness. Now, my go-to example when I try to explain cynicism or the understanding that I'm proposing here to other people is my own personal meat consumption. I know that it would be healthier to eat less meat. I know that it would be better for the environment. A recent study found that a vegetarian produces 0.6 tons CO2 less each year. And I know that there are many convincing moral arguments against eating meat. Just in the roughly 10 minutes that we've been speaking here, almost 20 million fish have been caught and 1.2 million chickens killed for food. And yet I eat meat because it's comfortable and because I like it. Timothy Buse, professor of English at Brown University, calls cynicism a, quote, condition of disillusion. While I have no illusion about my meat consumption, I still do it. William Barnes understands cynicism as a subversion of conventional value systems and a keeping of distance through a filter of insincerity. Because I like it. What argument could be more insincere compared to health, environment, morality? But as Klüppel writes, telling a cynic to stop being cynical is like telling rain to stop falling. Now the question is, why have a whole conference on cynicism and its tamer sibling irony? And Dorothee expanded on that already a little bit. Because Sloterdijk, Brown, and Barnes all point out what Zizek simply faces as an era of cynicism that we live in. Quote, cynicism is more than an intellectual topic or a passing melody. It lies at just such a central place in our politics that it could be used as an organizing concept, a way to structure an inquiry into politics. But not just politics, our society, our culture, our everyday lives. They're all embedded in a mindset of the asymmetrical couple, cynicism and irony. Although they both inform many satirical, critical, or nihilistic experiences and expressions, they're often not theorized as structural powers of the Western mindset. And I think this afternoon as well as tomorrow is hoping to be a step in that direction. Now once I finish talking, which will be very soon, I don't want to have you wait for too long, I'm incredibly excited to actually start our grad conference by highlighting the wonderful research that is done by undergrad students at this university with our undergrad panel. This will be followed by our first and last grad panel of the day, where we will get to hear 3 talks on cynicism and irony in literature. Tomorrow morning, we will start with a panel on political cynicism and a panel on cynicism and irony in TV and film. After the lunch break, we will hear a panel on cynicism and rhetoric, and finally, a very promising keynote speech titled The Gods of Irony by Silke Maria Weineck, professor at the University of Michigan, who unfortunately today doesn't feel super well and is staying in the hotel, so she can rock all of us tomorrow. As you can see on the program, we have a handful of coffee breaks in which there will be refreshments in the back. I also want to invite all presenters, panel chair, and the German faculty to the reception in Global Scholars Hall 117 tonight, starting around 5:30. And tomorrow we will end the conference at a post-conference dinner for all presenters and panel chairs at the McMenamin's East 19th Cafe, starting at 6:15. Now there are obviously many thanks to give, but I want to start with the Department of German and Scandinavian and thank for continual support from the get-go. Without a supporting department, this would not be possible. I of course also want to thank the department for its financial support, as well as the Oregon Humanities Center, the university's graduate school, the program of Folklore and Public Culture, the Department of Education Studies, the Department of Philosophy, and the Department of Cinema Studies. Thank you all very much. And although it makes me feel like I'm expecting an Oscar or something like that, I do want to drop a few names. First of all, I want to thank Lisa Höller and Jeremiah Young for their support and feedback as part of the conference committee. I want to thank our student worker Mats Müller for her help with the homepage and many printing tasks. And lastly, I want to thank the department manager of the department, Perry Schoyorf, for her help throughout the process and most of all her patience. I had considered going through my emails to see how often I had written to Perry during the planning of the conference, but that number would have been probably close to 300 or something. All right, I've talked for way too long, and we are all here to hear our wonderful panels. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Jeremiah, our first panel chair, to introduce our wonderful first presenters. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joscha. So yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce our wonderful undergrad panel, and we have 2 promising undergraduate students with us today. The first of which is Maya Lansing. She's a native Oregonian and a linguistics major here at the University of Oregon, and she also studies German. She's interested in language acquisition and the figurative language and language variations. She works at the Speech and Language Lab, directed by Dr. Redford, that focuses on how motor processes and language production interact to define the characteristic rhythms of fluent speech. And today she will talk to us about how to say mean things nicely, evolution of figurative language in media. So please join me in welcoming Maya Lansing.
Hello. How can people be free? This was a question that the German philosopher Karl Marx asked over 100 years ago, yet is still heavily debated today. To free ourselves from the world's natural restraints, we became tangled in our own social constraints. He theorizes that all of history consists of building conflict around an injustice to the point of evoking a revolution that evolves society. Apply this theory to the concept of sarcasm, and we will see that sarcasm is its own social revolution evoking change. Irony and sarcasm are used to avoid negative connotations by hiding behind a situational denotation. So how free is free speech if we have to, if we feel the need to hide our meaning behind words? Many people, especially second language learners, when learning these types of figurative language, such as irony and sarcasm, may ask, well then how can we know what the speaker's meaning is? I believe that we can respond to this question by looking at contextual language features and analyzing cultural patterns exploited in media. I think that we can not only learn to become fluent in figurative language, but also learn to manipulate language in a way that goes beyond words. So through my talk, I hope to explore the ideas around sarcasm being a subtle way to safely expose contradictions around an idea or injustice, and that the conflict that may arise can set social revolts in motion and can lead to societal change, because society won't make things better unless it sees just how bad they are. But before we dive in, I think it's important to know that sarcasm is connected to various types of brain function, because our brains are kind of a big deal and we're curious about how they work to drive our minds and bodies. An interesting study covered by Seeker.com examined the link between sarcasm and creativity. Participants were asked to behave either sarcastically, sincerely, or neutral before being paired with another participant to have a conversation with. After the conversation, they were given tests to measure their creativity and their ability to measure how well they could think abstractly. The researchers found that after a sarcastic conversation, participants were more creative and better abstract thinkers. And it didn't matter if they were the ones being sarcastic, even the ones on the receiving end of the sarcastic conversation showed an increase in their cognitive functions. So even just hearing sarcasm can make you more intelligent. You're welcome. But why would being sarcastic help with anything besides being the funniest person ever? A co-author of the study, Francesca Gino, hypothesized that to create or decode sarcasm, both the expressors and the recipients of sarcasm need to overcome the contradiction between the literal and actual meanings of the sarcastic expressions. This is a process that activates and is facilitated by abstraction, which in turn promotes creative thinking. But dealing with constant sarcasm can be frustrating too, as most who have dealt with a sarcastic teenager on a daily basis can attest to. How does someone get the benefits of sarcasm without driving everyone around them crazy? Well, the key is the relationship you have with the other person. If a sarcastic exchange happens between two friends, they know the other is joking and don't mind. But if a stranger is sarcastic, the recipient isn't sure if they're being mocked and they could take offense. So to practice safe sarcasm, the researchers recommend knowing your audience. Before we really begin, I would like to better understand my audience, so I think we should get an idea of who already knows some sarcasm. Here are some key indicators put together by people at the HuffPost. If you can identify with any of these, please nod your head, breathe through your mouth, or perhaps chuckle. So your commentary knows no limits. You can be hilariously expressive at inappropriate times. You're not a hater, you're just shamelessly honest about how you're feeling. When you're clearly in a bad mood and someone still bothers to ask you how you're feeling, you can't resist the urge to crack a joke. You have a way with words like no other. Did any of you sense some sarcasm? It turns out that people that can recognize sarcasm tend to have a healthier brain function than those who don't, and not being able to identify sarcasm can be linked to neurological disorders such as schizophrenia, autism, dementia, and so forth. Understanding sarcasm can boost creative thinking because it takes both brain hemispheres to process it. According to Live Science, sarcasm is actually part of our evolution, and if you don't get sarcasm, then you must have some damage to your parahippocampal gyrus, which is shown right there. Scientists have encountered children as young as 4 who say, "Smooth move, Mom," at a parent's mistake. So because people can start sensing sarcasm as young as 4 years old, sarcasm is not something that is gained in the process of education, but more of a developing cognitive ability. In 2002, the Awareness of Social Inference test was created using sarcasm as a means to catch dementia in patients that had passed every other neuropsychological test, and it was able to detect most of onset dementia. So why is knowing sarcasm important aside from promoting top-notch brain function? An experienced linguist and the author of Talk is Cheap, Sarcasm, Alienation, and the Evolution of Language, John Heyman says, it's practically the primary language in modern society. So if you don't get it, you could risk becoming a social pariah. Moving into mainstream media, we see a need for sarcasm detectors because of how useful they would be in this age of technology and artificial intelligence. Identifying sarcasm also creates benefits for businesses. It turns out scientists can program a computer to recognize sarcasm. They called it a semi-supervised algorithm for sarcastic identification. This program was able to catch 77% of the sarcastic statements in Amazon purchase comments. The scientists say that a computer that could recognize sarcasm could do a better job of summarizing user opinions in product reviews than the system in place now. One day, perhaps we could see facial recognition that could also identify sarcastic behaviors. There were researchers who were trying to identify sarcastic social cues and conducted an experiment that analyzed the sarcasm in American TV sitcoms. And they were actually able to consistently assert that there's a blank face version of sarcasm delivery. These type of technological improvements may be closer now more than ever. Aside from creating algorithms to help businesses assess product reviews, sarcasm has also found a way into advertisement to make more dramatic marketing campaigns. Canadian actor Ryan Reynolds, known for his work in Deadpool, Green Lantern, Detective Pikachu, and some other good stuff, has recently made his own brand of gin called Aviation. He's also graced us with his very own line of commercials to promote said gin. In his commercial titled The Process, he challenges traditional standards of commercials and flat out mocks the regulation of advertisement. We see this when he breaks the rules of media norms and destroys any stereotypes we once held about ads holding back on money grabs and holding any truth in them. He warmly begins in a floral setting, telling us that he's grateful we have asked him what makes aviation gin so delicious. He proceeds to explain to us the various processes the gin goes through before arriving to us by narrating various delightful scenes accompanied by lovely violin music. We are taken to what is said to be the very beginning of each day at the aviation farm. The growers meditate silently for 4 hours to greet the new day. From there, it's just a quick scoot down to the grove to start work. The citrus fruits are misted using only the finest tears of aviation's owner, Ryan Reynolds himself. So we see him use self-deprecation. All of his botanicals are humanely caught, cage-free, and grain-fed, which is something we might use to describe livestock. The reason some people don't drink gin is because of the strong juniper berry taste. So after apologizing to each individual berry, they beat the living heck out of them, creating a smoother, more refined finish. And to ensure that heavenly taste, every bottle is ordained by the Unitarian Church of Fresno, California. It is then serenaded by the healing music of Sarah McLachlan before being shipped out. He then addresses the audience to make a sarcastic pun by saying that some may call this overkill, but when you go to your local bar and murder this martini, who's the killer now? He also inserts that blank face that we talked about. The ad ends with one final sarcastic remark: Aviation, an American original, now owned by a Canadian. And there we see his use of persistent sarcasm. So forget media trying to subliminally sell their standards to us by using dishonest marketing tactics. It's now free to be an all-out misleading warfare. Could you tell that he wasn't being honest about the process? Maybe some could tell because of its exaggeration of every point, but perhaps some perceived the ad as a real informational process of how they make their gin so good. Using sarcasm allows media producers to obscure the line between entertainment and consumer information without too much scrutiny from the forces that are meant to regulate such false advertisement. Another ad that challenges traditional standards comes from IKEA in 2014 with their release of The Book. This spoof-style trailer announces the launch of a catalog that includes features such as eternal battery life and tactile touch technology. The paper catalog for IKEA's 2015 collection is presented as if it were the latest tech. do that now.
You know, once in a while, something comes along that changes the way we live. A device so simple and intuitive, using it is almost unique. Introducing the 2015 IKEA catalog. It's not a digital book or an e-book. It's a book. The first thing to note is no cables, not even a power cable. The 2015 IKEA catalog comes fully charged and the battery life is eternal. The interface is 7.5 by 8 inches, but can expand to 15 by 8 inches. The navigation is based on tactile touch technology that you can actually feel. Content comes pre-installed via 328 high-definition pages of inspiring and furnishing ideas. To start browsing, simply touch and drag. Right to left to move forwards. Left to right to move backwards. Notice something else? That's right, no lag. Each crystal clear page loads instantaneously, no matter how fast you scroll. If you want to get a quick overview, just hold it in the palm of your hand and using just your thumb, speed browse the content. If you find something you want to save for later, you can simply bookmark it. And even if you close the application, you can easily find the bookmark again. Amazing. What about multiple users? For that, we've introduced a simple color coding system to avoid confusion. If you want to share a particularly inspiring item, you literally share it. Another special feature is password protection, which is voice activated. Excuse me, that's mine. At IKEA, we feel that technology, disrupt enhancing, should be in the hands of everyone. So the 2015 IKEA catalog is free. You can download one from your mailbox if you want to open with a key. If it's not there, try refresh the next day. Or you can upload yourself to the IKEA store and find one there. Experience the power of a book.
So the irony of the show is how annoyingly precise the actors are when investigating a crime of phallus-themed nature. The joke is that all the effort and attention to the detail we usually see in a true crime documentary, thank you, is now being used to examine a juvenile act as opposed to a grisly murder. And it's done so well that it almost doesn't seem satirical. It feels so real that many people believed it was. In the first season of the Netflix series, the show follows a student documentarian and his friend as they try to uncover who vandalized cars in the school parking lot at a made-up yet believable high school in Oceanside, California. It begins with the interview of Dylan Maxwell. The audience then watches various newscasters describe this crime along with videos taken from social media. The criminal act consists of 27 penises being spray painted onto faculty vehicles with damages exceeding $100K. The show then follows interviews from fellow students describing the crime and Dylan's tendencies that fit the culprit's behavior. More social media videos are used to show Dylan doing random juvenile acts such as pranks to make him fit the crime. Dylan is now facing expulsion and legal charges due to the recent crime. This show was important because this type of humor can grab the attention of a wide range of people while sprinkling in relevant details and affairs to increase awareness of injustice in everyday systems. This can encourage more people to participate in solving ambiguous situations. The show explores how Dylan was discriminated against and framed for multiple crimes and how the truth that was uncovered challenged the biases of the audience, which is a huge problem in our justice system today and a reoccurring theme in true crime shows. This title sheds light on our judicial system and how might true crime investigations be outside of television. It draws attention to personal and cultural biases through a rich study on various types of masculinity. It shows how culture today can take things too seriously or not seriously enough, but is not disrespecting other true crime series. It supports other documentaries by spoofing them. You can see cultural apathy today by comparing the plot bluntly to its counterpart. It doesn't matter if that infrastructure is built around the grisly extinguishing of a human life or just a defaced Prius. This is to contrast the humorous mockumentary style with the serious true crime genre. This says a lot about our generation's empathy or lack thereof. We wouldn't see the show on TV because of its attention to phallus details aimed at an underaged high school audience would be seen as inappropriate, even though that is not the case when the details presented are actual gore. Because their situation is humorous, it is taken less seriously. The show tries to take the subject very seriously, even though it's highly juvenile, by taking the time to also explore mature subject matters and the very serious repercussions of the grand vandalism. The show goes deeper to examine social constructs, technology, and adolescence through a fictional investigation. The incongruity between the matters is ironic and humorous. Graffiti doesn't usually amount to a vile act, and high school pranks don't usually cause people's lives to be ruined. This makes me want to explore more into what the culture is today around justice. If everyone is innocent until proven guilty, then Dylan would not have been in this predicament. The show examines situations where everyone is guilty until proven innocent, like many other true crime titles today. The use of sarcasm to lightheartedly expand on a heavy topic and point out injustices in our cultural systems should be praised. Such profound confrontation can evoke emotion and change from even the most skeptical audiences. I believe the rise of shows expressing skepticism of the judicial system help create a better legal system with more checks and balances. We can see the power of having more checks and balances when people come together to unite their emotions and knowledge on social media to solve a true crime, as seen in Netflix's new limited series Don't F with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer, where these everyday vigilantes actually catch a killer before the police do. Well, now that we have seen how impactful sarcasm can be, how do we do it? Family Guy states it simply in a cutaway from a 2006 episode using a character known only for explaining jokes in some episodes. The scene begins with a man entering from a storm, shaking his umbrella while saying, "Nice day we're having," to our joke explainer and the main character of the show, Peter Griffin. This guy laughs, but Peter is confused about what is so funny. He explains that he said "nice day" but is covered in rain. Peter still doesn't understand, and this is where it is put into very clear terms that we can all understand. He said this when your brain knows it's not really a nice day. He said the opposite, so it's funny. Peter then understands his use of sarcasm in this ironic situation and is able to partake in the joke by also saying "nice day" sarcastically, and our joke guy is happy that Peter is now funny too. This is a simple definition, but I think we need to go further. Taking a look at dictionary definitions, we will see that sarcasm is the use of irony to mock or convey contempt. Okay, so what is irony? Looking at irony, we see that it is the expression of one's meaning by using language that normally signifies the opposite, typically for humorous or emphatic effect. We also see that it is synonymous with sarcasm and cynicism. So now we need to take a look at what cynicism is defined as. And we see it's an inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest or skepticism. So is skepticism the root of all this? How are all these things connected? Using these definitions, I believe we can work backwards to make sense of this. I believe that people are highly suspicious, and these suspicions can lead to cynical views, and the views detect ironic situations that can warrant response. And sarcasm is a method to respond, and it's a subtle way to express resentment and a means to exercise cynicism. So now that we have a somewhat black and white definition to work with, we need to know how to use it and to apply it to our own situations. So I recommend to keep it lighthearted and start by using it to refer to yourself or events and places. And always assess the mood and severity of the situation before you plan your attack. A pro tip is that it always expresses insincerity, so it can't be a one-off jab or it'll feel like a random attack. So it needs to be habitual. If you use sarcasm, you're pretty much committed for life because in serious or borderline inappropriate situations, everyone will think you're being mean when you're really being sarcastic. And also avoid savage sarcasm. Sometimes it's the simplest remarks. So So now that we know how to, we should also make ourselves familiar with why we might want to use sarcasm. Safe sarcasm can be used to test boundaries by delivering a subtle kick, and it can keep you out of trouble when you're expressing dissent. It gives a different context for a certain item, and using sarcasm is a way to take one's conflicted emotions and project them onto others for interpretation, making it also a deflective pain mechanism. But I recommend sarcasm for discovery and healing, and not deflecting and hurting. Well, I hope that by using these tips and assessing your situation, you can get your point across in a more effective and less offensive manner. Thank you for your time, and please remember that with great power comes great responsibility.
Thank you, Maya. That was wonderful. Our next presenter is Erin Smallwood, and Erin is a history major here at the University of Oregon. In history, she's interested and focuses on World War II, American and modern European history as well. She plans to continue her studies in graduate school and become an educator. Her talk today is called Cynical Dispositions in History, Examining the Holocaust and Current U.S. Political Bias. So please join me in welcoming Erin Smallwood.
So fancy. All right. Okay. In a culture in which one is regularly told lies, one wants to know not merely the truth, but the naked truth. Finding truth in society, public figures, the political world, or even relationships can be difficult to navigate. Peter Sloterdijk depicts this difficulty in his definition of cynicism as a state in society where people are trying to distinguish truth in a world seemingly built on lies. This outlook is often found as a negative, general distrust of society and individual intentions, questioning the reasons for which things are done and whether they are done with selfish intent. In this mindset, Sloterdijk argues, lying and ruling are synonyms. Sloterdijk argues that the cynical position is ingrained in Western society and is built on more than just the distrust of others and their motives of acting in self-preservation, but the willing acceptance of immoral or unjust actions that are a result of those often not working towards the public good. My research examines the role of cynical dispositions played throughout history, looking at the Holocaust and the political atmosphere in the Third Reich, as well as the political atmosphere within the United States and its current political culture. The first way that I plan on examining the cynical disposition in government of the Third Reich would be through the film Triumph of the Will. Triumph of the Will was produced in 1935, showcasing the Nazi Party rally of 1934 in Nuremberg, Germany. Throughout the film, hyperbole and exaggeration are commonly used as aspects that can contribute to societal beliefs, or that societal beliefs are unsupported by facts, leading to systemic change. With World War I ending in 1918, Germany was in a state of depression, economically as well as in the minds of the people, struggling to pull out of it and find new employment and economic means. Hitler portrayed himself and the Nazi regime as the solution to the problem. In the film, the easiest use of hyperbole led Hitler to transform from a statesman into a form of messiah for the country, ready to save it from depression and ruin. Hitler exhibits a high level of enthusiasm and charisma throughout the rally, projecting it well to the crowd. One of the greatest tactics used by Hitler to pursue a united Germany would be his reliance on the use of nationalism. This set Germans apart as a group that could do anything they put their minds to, as a superior race, so long as they did it together. Hitler outlines that the struggle to push to success will be difficult, but the benefits were already seen throughout the short reign of the Nazi Party and would continue to be all worth the while. So now I'm going to pull up one of his speeches in the film, Triumph of the Will, and then we're going to hear a little bit about it.
Meine Arbeitsmänner, zuerst einmal seid ihr in dieser Form zum Appell von mir und damit vor dem ganzen deutschen Volke angetreten. Wir repräsentieren eine große Idee und wir wissen, dass für Millionen unserer Volksgenossen die Arbeit nicht mehr ein trennender Begriff sein wird, sondern ein alle gemeinsam verbindender. Und dass insbesondere keiner mehr dann in Deutschland leben wird, der in der Arbeit Faust Minderes sehen wird als in irgendeiner anderen Arbeit. Nun, eure Schule
in this film,
On the block. Next to the crossing guards. Up at this wall.
this way, is it right here? No. The one next to that one. Okay, thank you. Okay. As Hitler speaks to the public at the rally, irony emerges. As he proclaimed, we know that for millions of our people, work will no longer be a dividing concept. And in particular, no one will live in Germany without working for our country. There is no other work. While attempting to create a more unified Germany, Hitler is simultaneously committing treacherous acts against fellow German citizens who were of Jewish descent, homosexuals, communists, disabled, and many more. Dachau, the first concentration camp, 10 miles northeast of Munich, had recently opened in March of 1933. Those deemed unfit or not of Aryan blood were being separated from society and the unity of Germany. The camp began to fill. Many of these citizens targeted by the Nazi Party were of various socioeconomic classes and roles within the community. Many even served Germany in the First World War. Shoemakers stood in line at a concentration camp next to titled upper-class society members and government officials, many only because a great-grandparent was a Jew. These people began working for Germany at the concentration camps, but in treacherous conditions and with no sense of self to even consider themselves as a citizen, showcasing again the irony of Hitler's reference to work as a non-dividing activity. Overall, Hitler proclaimed that work would no longer be a dividing factor throughout Germany, but was actively dividing up citizens based on beliefs, abilities, or ethnicities, and separating them from the functioning part of society. That work was not meant to divide them, but this division was continually found, even further in the concentration camps, between guards and prisoners, or even prisoners and other prisoners. Plumbers and farmers exchanged their tools of trade, while others traded in a livelihood for a new life behind barbed wire. With the veil of nationalism shielding consciousness from agrarious crimes against their neighbors and friends, how was this acceptance and implementation throughout Germany possible? Many were encouraged and empowered through Hitler's speeches, which he delivered in charismatic ways, as shown in Triumph of the Will. Hitler proclaims, "We cannot be disloyal to what has given us sense and purpose." German citizens were enamored by this nationalistic view and responsibility to Germany. They have seen the programs and jobs that were provided after the First World War through the Nazi regime. These programs gave them the sense and purpose that Hitler refers to, a purpose to work for a greater good, for a greater Germany. Leisure and travel programs were provided to the working class of Germany. Youth programs were created to build nationalistic ideals in young men and women of the country. This sense of purpose helped mold the cynical dispositions within the German people, leaving room for Hitler to continue to push boundaries and pursue immoral actions. Sloterdijk defines an aspect of the cynical mindset as an enlightened false consciousness, which was seemingly present in this time. The willing acceptance or submission to immoral actions, the mindset of, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I'm still going to keep doing it. This mindset can be found in fathers, brothers, and ordinary men called to serve in the Nazi regime, or in the German citizens quietly hanging the Nazi flags outside their front doors to avoid any disturbances, or even in the people living outside of the concentration camps, closing their eyes or not pretending to notice that their neighbors were disappearing. In each of these positions, a willing acceptance of the conditions was found. The cynical disposition found in Germany allowed for the rise of Hitler to become a legal dictator. Hitler manifested his grip on the country after passing the enabling laws, which came in response to the Reichstag fire, which occurred February 27, 1933. The passing of the enabling laws revoked civil liberties, allowed the Reich cabinet of Hitler's men to circumvent parliament, and took away the necessity for Hitler to seek the approval of President Paul von Hindenburg to declare a state of emergency. In the Reichstag fire, the communists of Germany were targeted and blamed. Soon following the accusations, many communists would be removed from office or their position of work and arrested, thus taking out a minority of potential opposition to Hitler and the rest of the Nazi Party. As Hitler's tyranny grew even ever stronger, the German people did not actively protest, reasonably associated with Sloterdijk's cynical disposition. Even though skepticism about the Reichstag fire and sudden emergency declaration in the country remained, many citizens willingly accept Hitler's grab for absolute power, while knowing moving forward in such a way may not be the best option. This acceptance through cynical disposition included accepting the accusation against communists regarding the Reichstag fire, which was later proved to be initiated by the Nazi Party, the acts of self-preservation by Hitler as Führer, and the beginning of what would become one of the most genocidal regimes in history. Doris Bergen's book, War and Genocide, specifies many preconditions to the Holocaust, building further on this idea of taking advantage of already marginalized groups and cynical dispositions in society. Starting with the persecution of minorities such as communists and homosexuals, Hitler was sure to test the public's response before pushing further. Testing how far he could push, marginalizing other minorities in slow progressions allowed for the willing acceptance of the people of Germany and their failure to react to the overall drastic change this was making. Bergen shows the public's response in gradual discrimination, writing, "There was likewise no protest in Germany within the spring of 1933, when Nazi regulations banned the Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, some mainstream Protestants and Catholic churches encouraged state measures against a religious group they considered a dangerous cult. Finding that the public did not seem swayed by the regulations towards the Jehovah's Witnesses, gave the green light to continue pushing forward towards the concentration camps, isolating and persecuting other minorities in society. This process became normalized, whether it was through nationalism or other means." Bergen writes, "In this climate of persecution, print and visual propaganda served to disseminate stereotypes, normalize stigmatization, and further isolate Jews and other targets of abuse. The creative atmosphere provided a space for the cynical conscious to dwell. Jewish citizens began to be discriminated against to a greater extent, kicked out of neighborhoods, jobs, community organizations, and various other things. Knowing that it was inhumane and wrong, many turned a blind eye or found justification in the normalization of creating a unified German front. These pre-existing views in German society contributed to allowing and adapting to the cynical disposition, to maintain loyalty to the German nation and discarding people who threatened such a system, though inhumane, made an easier way for willing acceptance. Although an interesting example is found with the Jewish boycott near the beginning of the Holocaust. As Hitler monitored the public's response to his actions and programs, many non-Jewish people were impacted by the boycott on Jewish goods and stores, and all Germans began to see the cost. Getting humiliated by going to the shop or buying goods, having a gray line to distinguish between the Jewish store owner or the Aryan workers. With that, it's written that many were aware of the anti-Jewish boycott and that it was damaging to the public image at home and abroad, and Hitler called it off ahead of schedule. German citizens, for a moment, overcame their cynical disposition towards Hitler and the Nazi Party, speaking out and showing their disagreement. The boycott stopped. Why then did the nation slip back into the silence in a willing acceptance that allowed the Jewish citizens to be taken away to concentration camps? Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem, her reporting from the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, demonstrates how Jewish people were seen by some in society. Eichmann refers to the Jews as a people who lived for their idea and who were prepared to sacrifice for their idea, everything and especially everybody. This portrays the Jewish people cynically, only acting upon and doing everything for their own good and self-interest or self-preservation. The cynical disposition can also transfer to other German citizens, allowing for their cynical dispositions to emerge. A knowledge that not all Jewish people are the same, that such a broad claim does not hold accuracy, and is still using it as a justification to accept the continual persecution and discrimination against the Jewish people. Eichmann also refers to one of the most common slogans throughout the Nazi era as the battle of destiny for the German people. Building off of this slogan, there was a suggestion that there was no war, and that there was simply a push and fight for the German destiny, and that war was an acceptable part of this struggle. A life or death matter for the German people. Regardless, it is still difficult to justify mass murder and suffering from this reasoning. As the public heard and interacted with such a slogan, seeing the impacts it began to have on Jews, including the ensuing discrimination and persecution, they had the choice to decipher the truth of it for themselves. Maybe that was to believe such was for destiny, or to question whether or not the Jews really caused such a threat to society. Whatever understanding or attempt to grasp at the truth, eyes were still turned, ignorance was bliss. Easier to sit still and not actively question or risk speaking up and fearing the atrocities would then begin to personally impact one or one's family. There were many aspects that were responsible for the Holocaust and the atrocities that happened, though Sloterdijk's cynical position can most certainly be seen as a significant one. Peter Sloterdijk argues a philosophical understanding of cynicism as seemingly ingrained in Western society. Found widely throughout Western civilizations, a cynical disposition enabled many of the conditions that were found in the Third Reich and Holocaust in Germany, and it is still at the root of many Western societies, including our own American society today. It is important to keep these arguments in mind as I transition into considering the cynical disposition at play within American society and politics. The root of cynical disposition in our society is something you may occasionally recognize, but not comprehend fully. Personally, I find my cynical disposition when seeing, discussing, or reading about homeless people. I come from a small town in Oregon and was raised most of my life on a farm. There weren't homeless people in my town. Moving to Eugene was a game changer for me. A study done by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is shown on the screen, showed that Eugene has the highest level of homeless rates per capita in the entire United States. This 2018 study shows that Oregon overall had 14,476 people reporting as homeless. Having a traumatic experience with homelessness this summer in Eugene and my lack of experience with homeless people growing up leads to my cynical disposition here. I tend to subconsciously look skeptically at homeless people around the city, always assuming the worst about their intentions and lives. However, with these statistics, I also see the problem in the number of homeless in the city. Living here, I see so many people sleeping on the streets or digging through the garbage cans. There's many tent cities set up, people bearing the cold through those, and just trying to find shelter when it rains like it does every day. Though I know it's wrong of me to assume the worst in them, I am still choosing to be ignorant and to not take any form of action against this or against changing my view on it. I am content with being cynical. I also recognize this narrative and disposition is not just one that I find in my own life, but throughout various media sources or conversations with friends and colleagues. There are always articles coming up talking about the homeless problem in the area, ideas on how to address it, or blaming the same problems for various other negative things throughout the city. That the homeless are addicts and therefore prevented from getting jobs, but they should also be getting jobs and trying to improve their lives at the same time. In both cases, though this is broadcasted throughout the city, there aren't many initiatives taken on it. Nothing is being done. We are willingly accepting the state in which they live, and we live. More explicitly, I see this in the real-life example of having worked around the homeless at the old Starbucks in downtown Eugene. Working there, we had many different police officers and city officials come through, and they would talk to us about, oh, what can we do to improve the city? What can we do to make customers feel more comfortable to come in here with the homeless people just surrounding the block? And as many conversations happened, nothing was done about it and nothing was changed. I believe there's another side to why action is not being taken. Nothing was ever done. Oh, I already said that. Okay, we're gonna keep moving on. Politics are the ever-avoided subject throughout American society. What you avoid when being around family or in a discussion in a coffee shop, fearing the nearly guaranteed heated conversation that comes of it. Most of us are cynical toward American politics, but just seem to ignore it. The irony here is that we live in a nation founded on the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, freedom, democracy, and political will. Shouldn't these core values entail normalcy around discussing politics and their function throughout our society, not the contrary avoidance of it? Americans seem to have a general distrust towards people and political figures, though they do not tend to act on it. William Klüppel refers to this saying, the nationalistic impulse is moderated by pragmatic skepticism that came to pervade political culture. Americans acquired a deep distrust of politics, but they understood that distrust is a positive sign of nationalist faith, as evidence of social rationality. With such a mindset, American society is continuing to exercise Sloterdijk's idea of cynicism, to be skeptical and untrusting of others in politics, noticing things that are not morally acceptable, but coming to a certain level of acceptance. This mindset is not just a modern one, but one that has been prevalent throughout American society for a long time. Klüppel provides an example of the cynical disposition towards Bill Clinton in this case. Americans widely disagreed with the Lewinsky case and Clinton's morals, though at the same time continued to foster support for him, and ironically supported the continuous coverage of the Lewinsky case as TV ratings showed the public's continuing interest in covering the issue. People are always shocked to find that public figures are acting for their own self-interest, though they are originally skeptical towards these public figures, often knowing that they are not likely doing these things for the public good. While Americans seemed convicted that Bill Clinton had engaged in some kind of disreputable activity, they continued to support him. Everybody understood the implication. Americans are a cynical people. This tension between skepticism and respect for government is present but difficult to face directly in American society. Often people cope with this dilemma by reassuring themselves the core values and foundations of our country, that America is a land of opportunity and freedom, and that our country is far better off than many others. Our version of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness within the democratic system seems far better than many other versions of government throughout the world. So why complain? Klüppel addresses this circumstance well, stating, Americans are cynical because politics crashed with pronounced values and agreements they thought the culture had made. Citizen cynicism and ignorance of politics work to the powerful cynic's advantage. The cynical citizen has an excuse for avoiding political matters, and a powerful cynic, as a politician, knows how to encourage citizens and let rulers rule. Cynical disposition is ingrained and exemplified in our society, created by our government and political atmosphere. To compare this to our current political state, I analyzed the recent address from our President, Donald Trump, who spoke on January 16th about the initiative of his administration to protect the rights of prayer in school. They have the right to pray, and that's a very important, powerful right. President Trump has been shown various times throughout his term proclaiming his faith and the religious views he claims, although at the same time, there's a lot of actions that he shows that are contradictory to this, whether it is his scandal with Stormy Daniels and the affair shown there, or making fun and mocking of people with disabilities. And as the President of the United States claiming that he is a follower of Jesus and Christian, this brings up the cynical outlook because you see these contradictions to his original claims. Here we are able to examine, analyze, and determine where we stand on such a topic. We are given the opportunity to form our own opinion and stance, and often a cynical disposition is found. With a source that is actively contradicting itself and not holding tight to any one truth, it is difficult to discern what the truth may be, and it's easy to assume that the actions are not being done for the good of the public, but maybe for the good image of going into a year hopeful of re-election. Regardless of the stand and opinion taken in this situation, it is often easier to willingly accept this contradiction in society and move forward from it in ignorance. A continuation in the willing acceptance and skeptical views of political leaders and figures, it can surely create and allow conditions of atrocity to happen in our world, and frankly are currently turning a blind eye, allowing many atrocities. Recognizing personal cynical disposition and actively working to refute it and to bring light to such an issue in a time of ignorance can help prevent the allowance of such drastic conditions in our world moving forward. The importance of this is shown by Christopher Browning in the book Ordinary Men, Reserve Battalion 101 in The Final Solution in Poland, which argues that all humans are capable of acting in support of such atrocious conditions, that many people possess a character and personality type called the sleeper, which is described as a very common trait in that under particular circumstances, most people have a capacity for extreme violence and destruction of human life. Browning also addresses that this condition is more likely present among people in the time of war, stating, "War is the most conducive environment in which governments can adopt atrocity by policy and encounter few difficulties by implementing it. Discerning the causes and effects of cynical disposition is of significance and may contribute to preventing a future of greater suffering and atrocities. This only begins to acknowledge and deepen the understanding of the effects of the cynical disposition in world history in our country today. As this is a dense topic and I've only begun to dive into, I desire to continue my research looking further into the cynical disposition at play throughout history going into my graduate studies. I intend to look specifically into the civil rights era here in the United States, as well as how this played a role throughout genocides in the rest of the world throughout history. I believe that, I just said that. Further, I would like to examine what approaches to addressing or confronting the cynical disposition have proven successful in history, and to provide an idea of successful approaches on how to confront this issue moving forward. Thank you.